Today I'm pulling back the curtain on my own three-step process for writing with more ease and creativity. I'm Nicole, an award-winning essayist and writing coach, and I help writers craft their best work so they can share it with the world. Today I'm going to share with you 3 simple steps to help you get writing and stop struggling. So here are those 3 stages. The first is called pre-writing. The second stage is drafting. And the third stage is shaping. And so the most important thing is that we're firing up the right part of the brain for each of these activities. So that's going to just keep us in alignment with our flow, with our creativity, and use that more logical step-by-step part of the brain later when we need to start making some decisions about organizing, arranging, and editing. So let's start with pre-writing. This is the stage where you are gathering and generating the kinds of fragments that will be starting points for you to develop scenes and follow interesting leads and sort of see what's going to anchor the story that you are about to draft. Your creative brain is really good at finding patterns and making associations and links between ideas and images and all of that stuff that's just brewing in your memory bank and kind of swirling around in your subconscious. So I like to start with a kind of creative brain dump, and I use a tool called mind mapping to help do that gathering work I was describing, getting all of that input from my brain that feels connected to this story idea that I have, and visually representing it on paper so that I can then sort through it and see where I can make some connections and figure out what has a little bit of heat and that would be a good starting point to write into. Mind mapping is literally a visual way to start making connections that you might not normally make in your own brain, or if you started writing where you think the starting point of your story is through to the end, it's really a helpful tool for seeing those patterns that are then going to make a really interesting, textured, interlinked story. If you've ever felt stuck and just don't know where to begin, mind mapping is the tool for you. It is going to give you so many possibilities for starting points. And it's a great tool that you can use through every stage of the process, from that first pre-writing, generating stage to drafting to revision. So here I just wanted to show you an example of how the mind mapping tool actually helps me generate the kinds of interesting images that will then be included in and revised as part of a final draft. So here we're looking at a finished piece. It's called Shame, Shame. It was published in Hippocampus magazine in 2016. And I've just highlighted areas where some of the imagery that I generated using my mind mapping tool found its way in and is part of the finalized piece. So these are all related to rain imagery. For the purposes of illustration, we're doing a little bit of a reverse engineering here. So you're not seeing me draft, you're seeing a final product that exemplifies this use of first generating ideas and then fine-tuning them. But the generation part, the part that is really hard to tap into if you're not using a tool like mind mapping that accesses those creative images in the first place. If you're just sitting down to write and you want to write evocatively from the senses, it's much harder to just sit and start and have those flashes of inspiration come to you. What I'm talking about is a tool that allows you to consciously work to generate imagery like this. So the opening line, raindrops pelt your umbrella like pebbles. You're going to see in the mind map how I use the idea of rain. There's this dampness in this whole piece that the rain image becomes central and ties back over and over again in the piece. And it's using that mind mapping tool that allowed me to generate many variations on the idea of rain and how it is going to work in this piece. So a little further down, the rain spits sideways at us. A wet dog smell rises from my jean jacket. A little further down in the second session, how pathetic to not catch a live worm after days of rain. And the final image here, I'm sure you can hear my heart. It's accelerated beat is persistent as a steady rain banging down the drain pipe. So now I'd like you to look at the mind mapping tool itself, if you haven't already, and see how these two things fit together, the pre-writing generative stage and then the actual drafting and revising stage. So I just wanted to show an example of what a mind map actually looks like in case you've never used one before, never seen one before. So what you do is in the very center of a page, doesn't have to be graph paper like this one, just a blank page, you write a word. It might be maybe a title that you're working with for your story, or just an idea for your story, or you can use this tool like after you have a draft in the editing process, when, for example, here I have an image of rain that I want to continue to use throughout a piece. The piece is called Shame Shame, published in Hippocampus. And so I kind of reverse engineered this process because the piece is written and I just wanted to pull out examples of imagery in the piece that I generated and would have used a mind map to do that. So when I think about rain, if I just spit out a bunch of ideas. I have a memory of standing with my friend under an umbrella during this period of fall, October wet season. And that was just a really crystal clear image that I ended up building a scene around. But that connects to the idea of rain, to a memory of rain. Rain when it falls. In this story, I wanted the tone to be there's some friction in this tone. It's a story about bullying. And so the rain doesn't just fall, it spits, it pelts, it bangs down the drain pipe. So when I make an offshoot of the word rain and put falls in it, I then branch out with other ideas connected to the idea of falling. And that's how I generated some words, some more images related to rain that I was able to bring into the piece. I also pictured in my mind on a rainy day where this story takes place at my old high school, that there would have been birds around on the grass looking for worms on a rainy day. And so that became another offshoot associated with the idea of rain, birds looking for worms, and also a rainy day image, because imagery isn't just visual information, it's also all of the five senses. A smell image was that idea of me getting soaked in my denim jacket and smelling like a wet dog. So you can see how this process works, how it can be used at different stages of the writing process, from the very beginning, generative pre-writing stage where you're just trying to dump out all your ideas on a page in a way that allows you to see everything and then make some choices about what to develop, what belongs in the story, what you're going to use here or there or maybe later. And then as the process continues, you can continue to use mind mapping to further develop imagery. There's a lot of sound in this example, the story Shame Shame. So I could have used this technique as well to kind of jot down all of the different sounds that I wanted to bring up and make a part of the atmosphere of that piece. So this is a tool I use all the time. It's so useful. It really gets you out of that linear headspace that doesn't necessarily nurture the collection of memories, the tapping of creativity, and accessing your intuition the way a tool like this one does. Now that you have some ideas of how to use mind mapping and really start to generate and gather those first starting points for your story idea, it's time to move on to stage 2. All right, so we're in the drafting stage. This is where things start to get interesting. We've generated some ideas, we've maybe written into some of them, and we're getting really excited about the possibilities for our personal narrative. And now it's time to pull things together, figure out what form or shape this story is going to take. Now, some people like to think, you just start writing the form is going to appear, how to structure this is going to come later. I actually like to do it as the second stage, and that's because I find that it helps me give my work focus. It makes it easier for me to get through a draft, just having a little bit of direction, a little bit of a skeleton of what I'm trying to do, where I'm going, and how I'm going to use all of that great information that I generated at the very beginning of this process. So, for example, I might decide to limit the word count on my piece. And so maybe I'll say, okay, this piece can be no longer than 1,500 words. Okay, now I have to start making some decisions about what's going to fit. Maybe it will be written in just 2 parts, 2 sections. So then what 2 scenes might belong there, or what are the 2 most essential pieces in this story that I want to tell that absolutely belong in this story, and the rest might be extra material I can use somewhere else. Once you make those decisions, it's going to get a lot easier to get through that draft because you have you've avoided that feeling of overwhelm. You actually have a goal that you're working toward, and you're not just free writing pages and pages and pages forever and then trying to figure out how it all fits together and makes sense. All right, I'm really curious about how you're feeling so far about this method that I'm sharing with you. I know it is very different than the way you've been taught to write. It might be very different than what you've learned, even if you've done a professional writing program. But this is the way that works for me. It's writer tested with many authors in my programs, and I'm just really excited to share it with you. So if this is sounding good to you and you're excited to try it, hit the like button for me. All right, we are on stage 3. It's time to shape your story. It's time to fine tune it. It's time to start using that other more logical part of your brain to arrange the pieces that you've drafted into a whole, a cohesive whole. So let's say you've got those 2 sections that you're working with, and you're working with, I think we might have said 1,500 words. So what belongs in each section? Which section comes first? We don't have to use chronological order. We want to go with impact. What's a great, exciting start? Where do we plan to go? How are we going to show a change from section 1 to section 2, have some kind of a transformation happening? So this is where you're going to make those decisions. You're also going to be doing your proofreading. You're going to be seeing if there are any threads that might be more developed, some more imagery you might want to add. And this is when you can bring in that mind mapping tool again. If you see something that's come up from the surface that looks interesting and you want to go in a little bit deeper and add some more, this is a time to use that tool and just kind of flesh things out. What I love about working this way is, as I mentioned before, you don't have to start with once upon a time. We're not rewriting old fairy tales. We are starting with impact, whether that is a powerful image or a memory or a scene of conflict. There are many, many starting points into your story. And I just want you to remember that going forward, that there are many possibilities for beginning a story, for ending a story. And when you're using this very creative tool, mind mapping, there are so many possibilities that you can choose from. You just have to choose the one that feels right and serves your story as you want to tell it. So as you can see, we're using all of our faculties, all parts of our brain in this writing process. The trick is to use the right part for the right stage of the process. And once you've got that down, it is all going to be so much easier, more fun, and more creative. We talked a bit about shapes of stories, how you might decide to format a draft, word count, structure, how many parts, how many sections. I want to get deeper into that. So if you're curious about learning more about the different types of possibilities or options for story structures, tune into the next video. We're going to get into it.